Hi everyone, welcome back to MathByTV. If you're preparing for the grade 7 math SOL, this video is for you. Today we're going to review 12 of the most important problem types commonly seen on the SOL. I'll explain each one step by step, show common mistakes to avoid, and help you understand the thinking behind the math. Pause the video anytime and try the problems on your own first. Let's get started. All right, let's start here with proportional relationships. We're going to identify the constant of proportionality from this table that you see here. And as you can see in this first row, we have the numbers 2 and 5. We need to figure out what number y is being multiplied by compared to x. So that means we can divide y by x. And that looks like this. Y divided by x. And so taking a look at that first row, well, we're going to write those numbers as 5 divided by 2. And 5 divided by 2 equals 2.5. Now let's make sure the relationship stays consistent. The next row, we have the 4 and a 10. So that's going to be written as 10 divided by 4. And that also equals 2.5. Okay, now let's take a look at the last row. We have the 6 and the 15, and that's written as 15 divided by 6, which equals 2.5. The ratio stays the same each time, as you can see, which means the constant of proportionality here is 2.5. So then we can write the equation as y equals 2.5x. And that is the final answer. Now, also I want to state that it means y increases by 2.5 for every increase of 1 in x. A common mistake is mixing up x over y instead of y over x. Always pay attention to which value is being divided. That's very important. All right, let's move to the next problem. Let's now work through a percent increase problem. A common mistake is stopping too early, so let's work through this carefully. So a concert ticket costs $48. The price increases by 25%. What is the new price? We know that a concert ticket costs $48. The price increases by 25%, and we need to find out what the new price is. So first, what we're going to do is convert the percent into a decimal. And as a decimal, 25% becomes 0.25. Next, we multiply that by the amount of money the concert ticket costs, which is $48. Multiplying 0.25 times 48 equals 12. So the price increased by $12. But we are not finished yet. The question asks for the new price, meaning that we need to add 48 plus 12. So the original price that the concert ticket costs plus the increase in price of $12, which equals 60. So the new price is $60. And that is the final answer here. Now, another common mistake that I would like to say is subtracting instead of adding. Since the price increased, we add. Let's move on to the next problem. Now let's look at a percent decrease. So this problem reads, a backpack costs $72. It is on sale for 30% off. What is the sale price? Okay, so what we need to do is convert the percent into a decimal, meaning that 30% becomes 0.30. And we're going to multiply that by the cost of the backpack, which is $72. And so that equals 21.6. But remember, in money problems, the decimal represents dollars and cents. So 21.6 means $21.60. But remember, $21.60 is not the final price. That's only the amount being taken off. So we have to take $21.60 from $72. So $72 minus $21.60 equals $50.40. That's the final answer. All right, but I will say that a common mistake here is stopping at the discount instead of finding the final price. Let's move on to the next question. Let's work through an integer problem with a real world situation. And we see here that this word problem says a scuba diver is at negative 8 feet below sea level. The diver rises 13 feet. What is the diver's new elevation? Well, the diver starts at negative 8 feet because the diver is below sea level. And rising means we move up, so we add positive 13, meaning that this looks like this. Negative 8 plus 13. So when the signs are different, subtract the numbers, and that looks like this. 13 minus 8, which equals 5. Now I do want to explain here, we keep the sign of the larger absolute value. Since 13 is larger and is positive, the answer is positive 5. So negative 8 plus 13 does indeed equal positive 5. And to answer the question, the diver is now 5 feet above sea level. So we'll just write that here, 5 feet above sea level. And that is the final answer. So as far as a common mistake is concerned, I would say it is forgetting what the answer means in this situation. On the SOL, always connect your answer back to the context. With that, let's move on to the next question. Okay, here's a two-step equation for us to solve. That is 3x minus 7 equals 20. We undo operations in reverse order. So we undo subtraction first by adding 7. We'll add 7 to both sides here, on the left and on the right. Notice that the negative 7, positive 7 cancel out. We're left with 3x equals 27. Now we also need to undo multiplication. We undo multiplication by dividing by 3 on both sides. The 3's cancel out. We're left with x equals 9. Now, I would also like to point out, always check mentally if your answer makes sense. So looking back at the original equation, where I see this x, I'll just place a 9 there. 3 times 9 is 27. 27 minus 7 does indeed equal 20. So your final correct answer is x equals 9. Let's move on to the next problem. Let's solve this inequality. Negative 3x plus 6 is greater than 18. Inequalities are very similar to equations. As you can see here, we have plus 6. We can undo addition by subtracting 6 from both sides. So minus 6 on the left, minus 6 on the right. And so we're left with negative 3x plus 6 minus 6 cancel out, greater than 18 minus 6 is 12. Since we're multiplying by negative 3, we can undo multiplication by dividing by -3 on both sides. -3 on the left and on the right. The -3's cancel out, and we have x is less than -4. All right, so what I want to say about this is notice the inequality symbol changed directions. So anytime you're multiplying or dividing by a negative number, the inequality must flip directions. That's one of the biggest mistakes people make on inequalities, is forgetting to flip directions when they're multiplying or dividing by a negative number. So while we're at it, we're going to graph x is less than -4. And as you know, we use an open circle because the symbol does not include equal to. So we'll place an open circle at -4. And which direction are we going to shade? Well, we're going to shade left because x is less than -4. Okay, so that's your final answer. X is less than -4. So let's move on to the next problem. Now let's look at an algebraic modeling problem. I will tell you these problems do test whether we can translate words into math. So let's go ahead and read what we're given. It says a gym charges a $15 membership fee plus $8 per class. Which expression represents the total cost after attending C classes? So let's identify the two parts of the situation. We have the $15 membership fee, and we also have the $8 per class. So the membership fee stays the same no matter how many classes are taken. This 15 is our constant. Now let's look at the classes. The phrase per class means multiplication is happening. So let's go ahead and write what we know. And we're going to use the variable C, which stands for classes. So we'll write 8C, which is saying 8 times C. So the C represents the number of classes. Now let's combine both parts. So that is plus the starting fee of $15. Okay, so that is 8C plus 15, which is the correct expression. So answer choice B has 8C plus 15, which is our final answer. A common mistake here is reversing the fixed fee and the multiplying term. So be very careful when you're working through these types of problems. Let's move on to the next problem. Here we need to find the volume of a cylinder. Notice our radius is 3 centimeters and our height is 5 centimeters. But we're going to use this formula to find the volume. So that is volume equals pi times the radius squared times the height. Let's fill in those values that we have right now. So we have the volume, which equals pi, and the radius is given to us as 3 centimeters. So that is 3 centimeters squared, and times the height. The height is given to us as 5 centimeters. Now, what you want to do is square the radius. Okay, so let's just write everything else out here. So we have the volume equals pi times, and we're squaring the radius, so 3 squared is you simply multiplying 3 times itself, which equals 9 times 5. So the volume is 45 pi. Another thing I want to point out is if you want a decimal approximation, we can multiply by pi. So that is volume equals 45 times approximately 3.14. And that gives us 141.3. So the volume is approximately, and I'll just write approximately here, 141.3 cubic centimeters. Okay, so just remember volume uses cubic units because we're measuring three-dimensional space. And I will also say that a common mistake is forgetting units or writing square centimeters instead of cubic centimeters. So 141.3 cubic centimeters is the final answer. That is the volume of this cylinder. Let's move on to the next problem. Let's look at a composite figure. A composite figure is a figure made from more than one shape. And instead of trying to solve the whole thing at once, we break it into smaller pieces. So let's take a look here at the rectangle. Okay, so we need to find the area of this rectangle. So that is area equals the length times the width. And as you can see here, on the rectangle, the length is given to us as 8 centimeters, and the width is given to us as 4 centimeters. So let's plug those in. So area equals the length is given to us as 8 times the width of 4. So that means that the area for the rectangle is 32 squared centimeters. Okay, so now let's take a look at the triangle. So we see here, we have this triangle, and we need to find the area of that triangle. So the area is 1/2 times the base times the height. Plug in those values. So we know that the base is given to us as 8 centimeters, and the height is given to us as 3 centimeters. So let's go ahead and plug those in. 1/2 times the base, which is given to us as 8 centimeters, times the height of 3. And think of this way. 1/2 of 8 equals what? Okay, well, 1/2 of 8 is 4. And 4 times 3 equals 12. Meaning that the area for the triangle is 12 squared centimeters, or centimeters squared. Okay, so now another thing I want to point out is that we have to find what the total area of the composite figure is. So that's where we add both together. So we add the area of the rectangle and the area of the triangle. So 32 plus 12 equals 44. So the area is 44 squared centimeters, and that is the final answer. And another thing I want to point out is that just remember, area uses square units. A common mistake is finding only one piece and forgetting to combine them. So be sure you're actually combining those pieces. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next problem. Okay, so here we have a problem on probability. And this says a bag contains 4 red marbles, 3 blue marbles, and 5 green marbles. What is the probability of selecting a blue marble? So first we need to find the total number of marbles. So we know that there are 4 red marbles plus 3 blue marbles plus 5 green marbles. So there are a total of 12 marbles in the bag. Now we place the number of blue marbles over the total. So recall, there are 3 blue marbles. So we'll place 3 on the top, and that is over the total of 12. And so now we simplify. So 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. So the final answer is 1/4. That's the probability. A common mistake is placing the total on top instead of the favorable outcome, so be careful with that. Let's go ahead and move on to the next problem. Here we're looking at a histogram with frequencies. Let's interpret the histogram. So to take a look here at the bars that we have here. Well, in a histogram, the height of the bar represents frequency. So take a look with me. This interval has a frequency of 2. This interval has a frequency of 5. This interval has a frequency of 8. And this interval has a frequency of 4. Now let's answer question 1. Which interval contains the most data values? So here we look for the tallest bar, and that is 20 to 30. So the interval from 20 to 30 contains the most data values. So that's what we'll place here, 20 to 30. And let's go ahead and answer the second question. And the question asks, how many total data values are represented? So this is where we add 2 plus 5 plus 8 plus 4. So there are 19 total data values represented, and that is 19 right here. Okay, now a common mistake here is forgetting to add all frequencies together. So be sure you're doing that. Let's go ahead and move on to the last problem. Now let's look at transformations. This figure has been reflected across the y-axis. And here is the reflected image. Now let's focus on point A. We see here point A starts at +3, +2. And after reflection, it becomes -3, +2. So notice what changed. Well, let's go ahead and write that down. So we started at +3, +2, and after reflection, the point became -3, +2. Okay, so let's take a look. We see here that we have the x values. We have 3 and -3. So the x values changed. And then the y values stayed exactly the same. So when reflecting across the y-axis, the x changes signs, as you can see here, and the y stays the same. A common mistake, though, is changing both coordinates. For a reflection across the y-axis, only the x-coordinate changes. So great job working through these grade 7 SOL problems. Remember, the SOL is not just about memorizing steps, it's about understanding the math and thinking carefully through the problem. So pause, think, and ask yourself, does my answer make sense? That quick habit can actually help you catch mistakes before test day. So thanks for watching. Keep practicing and stay tuned for more calm, clear math lessons right here on Math by TV.